You have finished the editing during the quarantine?
Yes, yeah, we actually the last day of kind of editing and everything, so the film is officially completed today.
Okay.
So today the film is fully completed. Yeah, so it's now just ready to rock and roll. So we got really blessed because we our last day of filming was the day before the shutdown. So it was like
Oh,
we were shooting on a Sunday, and then they shut everything, all film production down on Monday, and so luckily we were able to get everything in the can. And so because of it, it was like now you're just doing post production, right? Which is you don't have to do any real physical work.
yeah.
So it was really a blessing to really kind of have this opportunity to really take advantage of that. So yeah, we were able to get everything done, which is really exciting. And also because a lot of the people that we wanted to use originally, they were so swamped with so many other productions that they were going to have to do. But then because those productions also got shut down,
Yeah.
they had a little bit more time. So yeah, it was really nice. So it's official today. The film's completed. Very exciting. So I can't wait for everyone to be able to see what this thing looks like.
That was a strike of luck because if you would need one more day or one more week, maybe just
Not gonna
in
get it.
October you would finish the shooting.
Yeah, it never, and it happens, and especially with short films in general, like it's an arduous thing because you're financing it and you're doing all these things. So and other people that are part of the project have other obligations as well. So it's like you really can't afford to like kick things down the road for weeks or months at a time.
Yeah.
So we really did get lucky because, like you were saying, if this was something where like we just need one more day or two more days, but we can't do it until October, chances are the film's never going to get completed.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, we really were blessed. So I'm happy that we were able to do it and get it in the can, and it looks really good. Everyone that was a part of it should be very happy.
So is it close for what you envisioned for the project, or is it something different?
No, it's this is it's a the interesting thing about it is it's like everything that I had imagined the short looking like we were able to capture that. And that's really just a testimony to like the amazing team that I have, amazing producing team, but also like the set design and the wardrobe design, and everyone just really came together, locations, like so. And it's very rare usually especially when you're doing period pieces. I had so many people from like last year when you're like, you're going to do a period piece. Like, dude, that's so expensive and it's so hard to get it right. And this, that, and the third. And I was like, yeah, but if you get it right, it's going to be amazing,
Yeah.
So it's like, we just we got together the best team that, that we knew was capable and ready and wanted to take on the challenge. And they really poured their blood, sweat, and tears. And so we were able to just everything that we put on paper, we were able to put forward. And that's really nice because now it's something where as we move forward with the bigger project of this, we can use those same people as
Yeah.
well because we know that they were capable of doing it. So it's like in the more that you have, that they can have the more opportunity and responsibility as well. So it was really an awesome learning experience, but also an opportunity to really find the core groups of people that you want to work with in the long haul, which is really awesome as well. Instead of kind of like piecemaking these people together, it's like, wow, like these are people that you want to continuously work with on all projects that you have.
Yeah, and for just out of curiosity, which were the directors or even the movies that inspired this work of yours?
Well, the funny thing is there wasn't really. I'm always been a big historian, so I've always been fascinated about history, but I've always been fascinated about kind of like the real history. Like we have kind of like the history that's taught to us in school, and then we have like what really happened, right?
Yeah.
So I've always been fascinated with kind of getting underneath and really getting so it's after I had done research. So really, the kind of thing that sparked it was in 2012. I was watching the movie Schindler's List, and at the end of it, it's talking about 7 million Jews killed, whatever. And at the end of it, it was you're watching it. I'm going, man, 7 million people, and then you look at other numbers, and I'm saying anywhere from 7 to 10 million. And I was like, I wonder if there was any person of color that could have gotten caught up in all of that, because, you know, you weren't really exempt, you know, during that time. So that kind of started to lead down this research and down this rabbit hole, if you will. And so there wasn't a film that I was watching that was like, oh, I want to take this idea. It was just, I've always been a curious person. And this was an opportunity to where I was just like, well, I wonder if there was anything else. And as I started digging, you start finding more information. And of course, in 2012, the access to information was still good, but it wasn't like it is now, where, you know, you could find most of this in a, you know, in just like literally a Google search. You know, before it's like you're going to, you know, subsidiary libraries and all these other things. And that's kind of what led me down this path. And then you realize, you know, there's so much of our history, especially as people of color, that has been completely taken away from us. And oftentimes that's the reason why we're in the situations that we find ourselves in today, because we don't know what our history is. And our history has been marketed to us as something as though like we were nothing other than slaves from 1619. And that's what our history has always been, when that isn't the case. And so I always wanted to be able to create films and be able to create the films, and on the back end of the films, be able to have a dialogue about history and about this. And so what the zoo talks about is it talks about what was going on during the World War II. But one of the biggest things that was happening was what was going on in Africa, which was the pillaging of all of the minerals and the gold and the diamonds and the cocoa and the rubber. Like, in all these different countries were coming in and taking everything, you know, from Africa. And so, you know, one of the things is like, you know, King Leopold, who built Belgium and the castles and X, Y, and Z. Well, he got the money to finance all of that from the rubber mines of Congo, where he's killing 10 to 15 million Congolese men, women, and children, and then burning all of the documentation to suggest that it even happened, right? But yet people go to Belgium like, wow, it's so beautiful, but you don't even know what happened in order for them to have that, right? So it's like we're always so in love with like the beauty of everything, but we never want to know how it got there. And so that's what this film kind of talks about. It gets into, you know, these different countries were going into Africa, and the problem is that they were dying because of the heat and the climate and certain bugs, and they were just getting tore up. And they're like, how is it that these people that are from here are able to thrive in this community, but then we come in and we're just being destroyed? And so they would take these black people and they would experiment on them. They would dunk them in water, put them in heat lamps, and they would just test them constantly like lab rats, trying to break some type of genetic code or whatever, in hopes that they could then take it back to their people and go, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Now we can fully take over everything. And so this is what the zoo talks about. And it's also kind of a double entendre, because here in America, as well as other places in Europe, they had physical zoos where you would actually take these men, women of color, and children and put them in a simulated environment, and people could go and buy tickets and watch them be human beings, you know. And this is something that was happening in the United States all the way up until I believe like the 50s and 60s, you know. So it really is this encompassing thing where I wanted to tell this story, but then also help it start a conversation to get people more curious about their history and more curious about things that they don't know. Because I want you to say, I didn't know anything about this, and then you go and do the research, and then the hope is that you'll go, well, if I didn't know about this, what else might I not know? You know, and hopefully that then sparks some type of curiosity, so then you can start having deeper conversations instead of just kind of dealing, I guess, with the status quo, the very easy things that just make you feel good, when reality is, you know, most of our history is not that beautiful, and it's not that, you know, there's not a lot of glamour to it, but it's important to know, and it's important to talk about it.
Yeah, because I know that in America a few weeks ago there were the Black Lives Matter riots and all the great and some sad things that happened. Here in Portugal we had it was not like the same debate, because even if at the same time more people are curious about the dark past of the history, I don't think there's a general concern about that. But because many people like to think that, oh yeah, the Spanish and the French and the English, they were all terrible. We were very nice with the people in the countries we discovered. And so it's like it's always going to be a very interesting topic and very difficult to confront with, because it deals with so much that we are what we are now.
Yeah, it's, you know, the cognitive dissonance, right? I think it's, you know, we get so, you know, we've so much of what we know, it's been indoctrinated in us since birth. So you're told certain things, and you're told to trust this, and, you know, if they wear suits, then these people are honorable, you know. And these are those things that it's, you know, it's such a watered down version of everything. And like you were saying, in all these different countries, everyone has a history, everyone has a past. But it's important to understand that, like, especially here in America, you know, one of the things I always say is, like, we've been marching and protesting and X, Y, and Z for 400 years. It hasn't changed anything. Yeah. And the reason why that's happened is because the land in which where we were taken, which is America, right, through the transatlantic slave trade in 1619, we weren't brought here because they wanted to give us equal rights, because they wanted to see us as equal. So there is this kind of weird sense of, like, that, you know, so many people were protesting for equal rights in a land that was never built to give us equal rights. And so it becomes this thing where you really have to understand what you're fighting and what it is that you're ultimately trying to get. Because we were protesting in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, when they were tired of getting lynched, you know, and that was happening, and nothing changed. They just changed the way that they do it, you know. And in the other countries, again, it's like, you can, you know, you fall in love with the castles, and you fall in love with the infrastructure and all these other things, and you're kind of taught to, you know, anybody that's wearing all of the crown jewels and X, Y, and Z, you know, to, like, these are the people that are to rule, these are the people that know everything. When it's like, when most of those diamonds and everything were stolen, you know what I mean? Like, it was just like, there's a period called the Dark Ages, and there's a reason why it was called the Dark Ages, right? Like, there was a period where history was lost, millions and millions of books of true history were burnt all around the world, and out of that became an entirely new history. And so I think what happens is, what you see in every country is, you see people being more interested, but then they don't even know where to start, because it's not a national conversation, like you're saying, because it's not a national conversation, you feel like an outlier when you start to discover certain truths, and you don't have anybody to share it with, because everyone's like, no, that didn't exist, or, you know, those are for the conspiracy theorists, or, you know, they have all of these negative tones and bywords to call you when you're somebody that is just interested. And so for me as an artist, it was like, well, why not, instead of trying to be the person that wants to stand on the corner with a blowhorn, you know, and just blowhorning truth all day, where people just kind of tune you out, because we've already kind of stapled what those people are. Whether or not what they're saying is true or not, we've just already decided that we know who they are. And so it's like, one thing that everybody does relate to is entertainment. And so if you can create entertainment, you can kind of break through some cognitive dissonance, and then hopefully they're entertained, but then they're also educated. And then you kind of have a better, and I guess a more accessible opportunity to start some kind of, you know, more in-depth dialogue. And so that's really kind of, you know, what I'm really passionate about doing, because you got to know, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you came from.
Yeah, and I realized that this short feature is going to be you said that is going to be the like the introduction or the prologue to your feature film. It was your purpose in the beginning just to make the feature, or was the short first and the feature later?
No, the feature was the first project, actually. So I wrote a feature film script, and then, you know, the difficult thing is, you know, when you're introducing a topic like this, people loved the idea, but it was really, really hard for them to imagine what that would have been like. It's very rare that you can parlay people of color with, like, Nazi Germany. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not something that we've been taught to see or understand. So as much as people love the idea, they just didn't even understand how that would even mix and what that would look like. And so as the years were going on, like I said, I started this process in 2012. So again, it's like seed time and harvest. And like, we're in 2020 to get the short done. But it became like, I had gotten on another show, met another phenomenal artist who was a producer, who's my producing partner now, Jamal Mowry McCree. And he was like, you know, why don't why don't you just take this down? Why don't we make it a short first? You direct the short, then we at least have something to where it's almost like a proof of concept for all of these other people that we've already gone to who have been extremely interested in the film itself, but they need a visual. And so if we can give them, you know, a 20-25 minute kind of visual concept of what this looks like, that's going to help us kind of really get the process started. And so, you know, everything in the industry and entertainment, with everything, it's like you have to be very patient and you can't be discouraged. Like, you're going to hear thousands of no's. You're going to, you know, have a lot of the down days, but you have to just keep going, you know. And I've had the opportunity to be blessed with people around me that have believed in the vision, and have believed in what this was. And so they wanted to do everything that they could to march this thing forward. So now that we have this done, now we have a feature film done, but we're also in the process of writing a limited series for an 8-episode limited series for it as well, to really kind of corner the market as far as really being able to tell these great stories. Because the reality is, in a day in some of these men's life, you could write movies on top of movies on top of movies in just a day. You know, so the fact that we have so many different stories that we can tell, and so many different countries and organizations that were all a part of this, it just makes it that much more fascinating. And so, you know, for me, I've always been, you know, our ancestors endured tremendous hardship and tremendous suffering. And this is also an opportunity to say that they didn't endure all that for nothing, and that we have the opportunity to then come behind them and actually put them into the light and to talk about what they've been through, you know, because it's also not just about, oh, woe is us. It's about the enduring. Like, look at what we've endured. Like, we've always endured. No matter what has happened to us, we've always come out on the other side stronger and more resilient, but we're always kind of being fought and depressed and suppressed. But I've always been a big believer that anything that you continuously try to suppress, eventually it gets pushed to the surface, right? So you can only suppress something for so long before it just gets pushed out to the other side. And that's kind of what this is right now, where we're just in an opportunity where in 2012, I don't think society would have been ready for this type of film, because it would have been too far off. But I feel like now more conversations are wanting to be had, if you will, or at least being said that they want to be had. And so now we're kind of giving people an opportunity to be entertained, but then to also actually have that conversation.
Yeah, it's like the perfect timing, I would say. But I was asking before about your influences. It was like in the way of the directors or the movies that made you wanted to be a director.
A director, I would say I have. So there's movies like Defiance. There's a movie like The Green Mile. There's movies like Men of Honor. You know, I've always loved historical things and can bring it to life and can make it palpable, and you can make it entertaining for a generation that's right now, you know. And so I've always been fascinated with actually the essence of the human being. Like, I've never been like crazy about fantasy and sci-fi. It just never resonated with me. I love like stories, you know, and those types of stories about like kind of like the battle and the will of the human spirit is always what I love. And so I've always kind of resonated towards that. I never really saw myself as ever like taking the director route. Really, it was just something to where it's like you know, you're just trying to get some type of footing in entertainment in general, let alone just say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. It's like, well, how about you just do one thing and then just try to get in that way. And so as an actor, I still always love that, because as an artist, I always wanted to be a part of those types of films and a part of those types of stories. And so when I kind of, as I was watching them, and I mean, I pretty much watch all of those types. So it's very, very, like, I love the historical based things, and I love the humanity. And I also like the essence of the way that they're shot. Like, you know, it's not these giant, quick, you know, cuts all the time. It's just, you're kind of sitting with the individual and getting an opportunity to see how they're feeling and what they're doing. So we're talking about the Frank Darabonts and all these amazing directors that just allow you to just be with the human being and really experience all that they're feeling. And so that really kind of like gave me the, I guess, the landscape, if you will, and the emotional place of where I wanted to kind of direct and how I wanted to create this film, which is I wanted it to be the story that tells it, not the explosions and the this and the that. It's a story. And I think when you get into the story, you get into the humanity. And when you get into the humanity, you feel something. And when you feel something, you're somehow impacted. And that's what the goal is overall. So, and that's what those movies have done for me. So hopefully, you know, this movie is able to do the same thing for others.
And because I have to mention this because Yellowstone is quite known here, and also it was co-created by a great writer, Taylor Sheridan, and I was just thinking if there was something in his writing or even in the dialogues that you say that maybe or maybe not written by him that influenced in your own writing for these projects.
You know what's interesting is I've learned so Taylor, who's written Yellowstone, is the co-creator of Yellowstone and really the kind of visionary for how all these things were going. I learned so much from him, not even necessarily in the writing aspect, but in the directing aspect and in how to get people together. I think one of the things that is kind of like the missing ingredient for a lot of projects that people just don't think about, it's really important to assemble a team and a family of people. And sometimes it's like, there was a lot of people that kind of wanted to be a part of this show because it was the show that Kevin Costner was going to be on. So, all these big names are kind of getting thrown, but it was like he had a sense of the type of people that he wanted to tell these stories. And he believed in the people. And when you got the people together, you could see the energy in that flow. And so one of the biggest things I learned early on was like, the importance of a solid team and in the importance of a visionary knowing exactly what his vision is. And the thing with this show is, a lot of us are friends off the show. We spend time together off the show. When we're not filming, we're at somebody's house or at the cabin, and we're at a bonfire, we're out to dinner. And so he really created this essence where it's not just a whole bunch of individual artists that come to film something and then we all go our separate ways. It's like we actually enjoy having a dialogue with one another, learning from one another. And I think that really speaks to the testimony of how the show's success, because of the writing, but it's also because of the people that he brought together to really make the writing more than just dialogue. It's really the humanity. And so for me as a director and as a producer in this way, that was something that was really, really important. It was like you had a lot of people that are like, oh, I would love to be a part of this, but it's about getting the right people, and it's like you can't say yes to everyone. And that's kind of these realities that you really have to be firm on, but when you are firm on them and you understand what it is that you're looking for, you can really see that pay off. And oftentimes people don't really realize it. They think you're crazy or you think you're this, but it's like, if you believe in yourself and you know what the vision looks like, you really can, if you stay true to that, amazing things can happen. And so for me as an artist, that's the biggest thing that I've taken away from that. But I think that that's something that will be something that can sustain you for the long haul.
Yeah, and if you don't have the right people or the people you think that are the best for the project, it may be bad for the project as well, because you're going to be with all those people for so long. If you don't get along well, it's not going to end.
There's been a lot of big projects where you've gotten really good names and X, Y, and Z together, and the project doesn't last. Like it's something that people think, oh, this is a project that'll go 4, 5, 6, 7 season, and then halfway through season 1 it gets canceled, right? So it's like it's a really a thing to where it's like it doesn't matter how many names you have. It's about, are they matching the vision? Are they able to? And again, with this project as well, it's you have to humble yourself, right? You have a lot of different storylines and a lot of different people, but they're all here to service one another. It's not about, oh, look at me and how much am I getting? It's about, are you servicing the story? And so again, like that just speaks to the testimony of understanding how to be a people person. And then as a director, you really can kind of sit back and go, I don't have to micromanage because I got the people that I wanted. And because I know that these are the people that I wanted, they know what they're doing and they know what I'm looking for. So you kind of get to sit back in a way and just kind of watch your vision kind of unfold, which is really, really beautiful.
And what about, because I read somewhere that for this new film that you're in, the Chicken Saw Rancher, you are riding horses, of course, and you are singing as well, because you have all this background from opera, I think. That's really amazing.
Yeah, I did. I studied opera for a while, and I started in musical theater. I started in theater, and then went to musical theater, and then decided that that wasn't challenging enough. I have no idea what made me think that, because it couldn't be further from the truth. But then I wanted to get into opera. And I've always loved it. I've always loved opera. I've always been, like, even still to this day, Leontyne Price is my favorite opera singer. And so I listen to opera still constantly. And again, like I said, it's like I was saying before, I've always been a big historian. And so, of course, there's nothing more period than opera. And so, yeah, it was so interesting because, you know, this is the first film that I was co-starring in. And so I got the opportunity as a young artist. The one thing I always wanted to do was have the opportunity to play a real life, you know, human, a real life man. And this was the opportunity to do that. And it's a man named Jack Brown, who became Oklahoma's first sharecropper. And, you know, one of the things, especially that's always been big in the African-American community, is you sing. When you're in the field and you're in these things, you sing. So I remember looking at this audition, it was like, you have to be able to ride horses, and you have to be able to sing, and, you know, be able to use a firearm. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, this is me. Like, why are we even having auditions? Like, this is just me. And so I kind of approached the audition that way, even after the first, second, and third time. But it was really kind of awesome because you really got a sense to play this real. And this was based in 1860s, or so. Yeah, it was like 1866, I think. So you're really getting this time where that's what you did. Your only real opportunity was you were either running or you were being taken in. And this is a story about the Native American community and the African American community, how they came together and how they built. So this is Montfort T. Johnson, he died a multimillionaire because of the cattle draws that he would do, and with his partner Jack Brown, and doing so they did like this giant cattle draw that was 400 miles with 1,200 cattle. And they just did, so what they would do is they would go and they would rescue these cattle from these high mountains and things, and bring them back to the owners, and then they would get paid to do it. And so, but during this time, you're also dealing with Texas scalpers, you're dealing with this. So it's like you're getting all of this history, and then you also get to like be in the middle of fields with the cattle and sing songs around campfires. So it was really, really awesome because, again, it was like an opportunity to like really pay homage to your ancestors and to really pay homage to the people that have laid so much of the foundational work. And, you know, this is a story that most people would have never heard of and never would expect to hear. So again, it is really kind of awesome to be able to take a story in a life of a man who did such amazing things and really bring that story to life. Was really an amazing blessing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see. I don't know when it's going to be released, but
The one thing I keep saying, I'm hoping that it's fall, probably early winter. I'm hoping. It's like now, especially with all the shutdowns and things, it seems like everything kind of gets kicked further, and it's already kind of difficult in entertainment to get anything done anyways. And then when you add something like what's going on now, it's just like, it'll come out at some point, I hope. But I definitely did do it. It's definitely done.
It's definitely done. That's
definitely
sealed.
Done.
But let's just focus on the opera here for just a little moment. Do you remember what was the first opera that you ever heard in your life?
Oh, let's see. I think the first opera that I heard was it Madame Butterfly? It might have been, because I listened to the track. So here in America, we have, it's like PBS essentially. Yeah. And at night, after a certain time, they would play for like hours. It'd be like at 9, like between probably like 11 p.m. to like 7 a.m. They would play like greatest performances, right? And so what it would be is I would sit up at night and I would be watching these inserts of these opera singers in these different operas, and I was fascinated by watching it. So I think Leontyne Price was for sure the first opera singer that I ever heard, and I was just floored. And after that, I was like, I want to know more. So my favorite opera is Don Carlo, because I'm a bass, and that's pretty much an opera that is tailor-made for the bass. The thing that was always unfortunate is when I got into opera at 16, it was like, well, basses and operas, you're either like the grandfather or you're the villain, and you have to be like 50 or 60 years old in order to do that. So there's no space for you, like as a bass. But it was so amazing for me because I got to sing like the Irrkönig or whatever, which is in German. So it was the first time that I ever was like learning a different language, and why I picked that to learn as the first one was ridiculous. I remember crying in these opera lessons, like I just in tears, because it was so like, forget a constant vibrato. It's the dialect and it's the this, and you're three different people. I mean, just insane. But it was something that was so amazing. And still to this day, like I have these moments where it's just like all day, all I do is watch opera. And I'll watch, I'll watch the Don Carlos, or I'll watch whatever Puccini has. Verdi's probably my favorite because I love the darker tones.
Yeah.
But I just have always been fascinated because it's the discipline, and it's something that it's a lost art, and one of the things like here in America is that so many people think that it's like, oh, opera's not for them. And then they go to the opera and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Look at what they're doing. I'm like, yeah, I know. This is what I've been trying to tell you. Like, it's an amazing thing. And like, being in other places, it's kind of commonplace. It's like, yeah, it's opera. Like, this is what we do. This is a part of the culture, and still in America, not really there yet. It's still a thing where it's a certain generation, and after that generation, there's really nothing else left. So they're really big on concerts. But I could go on and on and on about them, but it is just, it's like, again, I say it's like a nerd out. Like, and even when I go to set, people are like, oh, damn, like, what are you listening to? I'm like, listening to an opera. And everyone's like, okay, listening to, or like, it's just, it's something that it's always, it's spoken to me, but it's also been something that was really challenging. And I always appreciate how hard it is, because it's something you have to be singing and training for like 7-8 hours a day, and for the rest of the time, you have to be learning the language. And as you know, you go to Portugal and you go to all these different places. If you don't know, if you're not doing it perfectly, they don't want you. If you're not going to do the language the way that it was written, the way that they're expecting it to hear, we're not going to hear it. We don't care how beautiful your voice is. So there's this amount of perfection that also comes with it, which I'm just like, man, I have major, major respect for anyone that's been able to turn that into a career. It's absolutely phenomenal. So I would say Madame Butterfly is probably the first opera that I heard, but Don Carlo is by far my favorite.
Because you mentioned something that I think it's quite common even here in Portugal, because even here people think that opera is like an intellectual thing just for an elite or something, but many people forget that opera was basically the popular art when it was a thing.
Yeah, it was common, right? Like, yeah. It was the most common thing that you would do was like, oh, we're all gonna go to an opera. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, that's what, because that was the form of entertainment. And that was like, before there was like the musical theater, there was opera. You know what I mean? And so like, I say that opera is kind of like what ballet is for dancing, right? It's like, it's the foundational principles for all types of artistry. The same way that you would think of acting as like being Shakespearean. If you can do Shakespeare, then chances are you can go on and do probably anything else that has to do with the art. And I've been the same way. I wanted to learn opera because I always loved singing spirituals, and I always loved jazz. Jazz is probably my favorite genre in general. And I had always said, like, look, if I don't make it as an artist, I'll move to another country and I'll just sing in jazz lounges all day. And then that's what my life will be. And I was like, and I'm fine with it. So it was just this thing where opera just kind of became this foundational thing for me, to where after that, I was like, everything else feels kind of easy. So it's like, but like you were saying, it was commonplace, but it is over here, it's the sad thing about opera here is it's pretty much dying off, because that older generation, as they kind of transition, there's not a younger generation that's kind of going and picking that up. Yeah. So there's a lot of opera centers here in America that are having to close up shop because there's nobody else to go and listen. So that's the thing that's really kind of unfortunate. And of course, now with the COVID, that doesn't help. They were already in trouble, and so now virtually they're probably going to be done. But that was always the thing. So it's like, if I could say anything to the younger generation, just, there's an opera for you. Just give it a chance. And I know that most of them don't have a 3.5 hour attention span anymore. And that's probably why they don't like it, because it's like, we have to do 3 hours. It's like, well, don't ever go to Wagner's The Ring, because you definitely don't have 9 or 10 hours of your life to spare. Even though it's a really awesome opera, but this is, that's what it took. It was like, you didn't have any, you weren't in a rush to go anywhere. So like, what was 3 hours? You know what I mean? Like, it was something awesome to do. Now it's just like, you can't be bothered with it.
When will we hear an album from you? Just because you like to sing so much.
That's a great question. That's something that's been wrestling on my spirit for a while, actually. And it's funny. I'm waiting. I don't know. I feel like it's coming closer than I probably realized. It's always this weird thing because, like I said, I've always sung spirituals, and that's like what I really love. It's the connection to my ancestors, truly. Before the language was completely broken. And then I also love the jazz. Like Johnny Hartman is my favorite jazz artist, and it does not matter. Johnny Hartman and Sarah Vaughan, you talk like we could just do this all day. Like when I talk about the music, like this is the thing. So I think it's just a time when I feel really settled and I can really just focus. I already have a title for the name of the album anyways, which is really funny because it's like you haven't even done anything yet. So I think it's already ready to happen. It's just about like, can you just sit down and can you just dedicate the time to do it? And so it's like now that this is done and now as some other things are kind of coming into fruition, maybe the time is coming, maybe within the next year or two.
Yeah, and I was checking your IMDb page a few days ago, and I was wondering because in the bottom of your page there was a little participation of yours in the choir in the Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien. And I was just thinking, what was like the experience for you in the time that you didn't have any experience in front of a camera, I believe? How was that?
Whoa, so the funny thing is my first actual on-camera, and this is what's so interesting about this is that my first actual on-camera experience ever was the show called Lincoln Heights, where I sang in a choir.
Yeah.
And it was actually such an interesting experience because Lincoln Heights was the church that I was currently at during that time. I was like 18. They were shooting. They used to shoot. The house that they shot at was the house that was like across the street from this church. And so for their season finale, they're like, well, we know that we want to have a choir. We want to know that we have this. And so then they just came to the church. We're like, hey, so they handpicked, some people from the choir. So that was like my first opportunity to get like into SAG and X, Y, and Z. So that was like my first like on camera thing with that. And that was awesome because there's that. And then after that, I think it came the Conan O'Brien thing, which was so interesting because it was like you're pretty much just brought in with all these other artists and you're sitting there and you're going like, for a lot of them, like this is what they do full time. You know what I mean? Like this is something that I was going to do full time, but that I really wanted to be an actor. And so kind of getting to be on that show and singing, I think it was for their Christmas special, I believe that it was. It was really awesome because it was just something where, it's all about seed time and harvest, and you're showing that you're actually going in the right direction, and that, you just never know how your talent's ever going to be utilized or what that's going to lead to. So that was really an awesome experience because I actually think like the first 3 things I ever did on camera were all singing. It was the show called Happy Endings that was on ABC. And so it was like Lincoln Heights where I was singing in a choir, and then Conan O'Brien where I was doing like the live audience singing in a choir. And then after that, another season finale of Happy Endings. So it was really kind of cool to kind of be like, this is something that I was doing throughout my entire life, and to kind of get my first, I guess professional paychecks from singing was really an awesome experience. And it's just also cool to be a part of other artists that have been doing it for so long, and you can also kind of learn from them, and they can teach you some gems as well, which is really cool.
Yeah. So I think that's it, Denim. Thank you so much. I'll be waiting for your album and your movies. And I wish you all the best in these dangerous and strange times that we are living in. And stay safe.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing this when it comes out.